Hi, I'm BECMI Berserker and welcome back to my channel. So I was recently thumbing through the player's manual of the basic set, you know, the one with Larry Elmore's iconic red dragon on it, when my eyes rested on the date the set was published, May 1983, and I realised, embarrassingly so for one so connected with this game, that I had completely missed the fact that this year is the 40th anniversary of the BECMI edition of the Dungeons & Dragons game. So I'm here to correct that dreadful omission with this quick video to say happy birthday BECMI, and to devote some time to celebrating its contribution to D&D lore. But this video is also to demonstrate why this edition stands out from the rest, and why I promote it so much over any other edition. The basic set, released in 1983 and written by Frank Mentzer, was a revised version of the 1981 edition, written by Tom Moldvay, although there was hardly any difference in the actual rules. Although there are many proponents of the Moldvay edition, which was the B in BX if you've heard of that, it was the ambition of TSR to reach a new and wider audience. So Mentzer's basic set was expanded from the 164-page book released in 1981 into a 2-book set, split into information specific to players and dungeon masters, totaling 64 pages for the player's manual and 48 pages for the Dungeon Master's rulebook. Already sounds like an improvement, right? Well, let's be fair with this. The Moldvay edition was also a boxed set, but was shipped with a copy of B2, Keep on the Borderlands, written by Gary Gygax, which is a 32-page adventure module whose size belies its scope. It is to this day one of the greatest D&D adventure modules ever released, and still played often in many groups. What's interesting to note with Keep on the Borderlands is that it was packed with introductory information for new Dungeon Masters. It was in fact the tutorial scenario for BX. However, for all of Moldvay's basic set's concise presentation and Gygax's attempt to make running a D&D game attractive, it was Mentzer's presentation in the 1983 edition that won over many more players, although one mustn't dismiss the cover as being a huge influence on people picking up the box in the first place. For one thing, the players had a book of their own, specific to player choices and what players needed to know, without giving away all those sneaky DM secrets. It might be hard to believe for younger viewers out there, but players were actively encouraged to avoid reading the Dungeon Master's rulebook, and it was a convention that many went along with. But it was the tutorial in the player's manual that really won over new players of the game. It was framed by introducing you to the concept of fantasy role-playing by writing in the second person, as you were an ambitious adventurer seeking treasure, before then introducing you to the beautiful cleric Alina, who healed you of your wounds before falling in battle against the evil magic user, Bargle, just when your friendship was growing. Mentzer's writing, quite literally from page 2 of the player's manual, ignored all the technical rules, and drew you into another world with its second-person language. It was you walking the halls of the dungeon. It was you being hit by the goblin and feeling a sense of frustration as it escaped. It was you that spoke with Alina as she healed you of your wounds. And it was you who fell foul of Bargle's magic, even as Alina lay dead at his feet, helping him escape, before waking from his evil sorcery to admonish yourself with conflicted early teen emotions. I've already covered how Bargle and Alina set the scene for many D&D games in another video, but clearly Mentzer's utilisation of this approach sucked in the minds of prospective players who were familiar with the works of Tolkien, Vance, and more, and suggested that they too may write stories of their own, with characters of their own. Mentzer's slow-burn introduction to the rules continued before we were let loose on a choose-your-own-path type of adventure. It was unsophisticated, but it worked as a perfect tutorial in teaching new players, who were likely reading the rules of this unusual game on their own, and without consultation. As for Dungeon Masters, although there was no Keep on the Borderlands in the 1983 box set, the Dungeon Master's rulebook took a similar approach to the player's manual by throwing you in at the deep end in running a short scenario many refer to as Castle Mistamere. But these Dungeon Masters were supported with copious amounts of advisory text. By the end of this, new Dungeon Masters had the confidence to populate the castle's second and third levels with their own monsters, the descriptions of which were provided in the same book. One has to note this critical step. You are being handed the keys and told to drive. So, with the release of the Expert set in the same year, apprentice Dungeon Masters lapped up the opportunity to take their scenarios into the wilderness and throw their players into the Isle of Dread. But the real seeds of why BECMI is such a brilliant game, and why I think its 40th anniversary should really be celebrated, are sown in the idea that characters may gain a stronghold, a wizard's tower, or some other permanent fixture in their adventurers' lives. Granted, this option was also presented in the previous 1981 expert set by David Cook and Steve Marsh, but Mentzer was allowed to expand on these ideas with future sets. You see, what BECMI offers more than any other Dungeons & Dragons edition, and indeed any other role-playing game that I'm aware of, is an end game, a point to it all. I mean, why does your character go adventuring in the first place? Revenge? Okay, you gain vengeance. Then what? Big bad cultists wanting to destroy everything good in the world? Okay, you do that. Then what? You do it again? When your character leans back in their chair at the local tavern thinking on his or her recent exploits, what's next? What's the point of it all? I'm often asked why I prefer BECMI over 1st or 2nd edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, and I'm also told by players of AD&D that watch my videos that they hadn't realised what BECMI had to offer. You see, the CMI of BECMI, the Companion, Master and Immortal rules, offered player characters an endgame, a reason to adventure beyond the current scenario or plot. It offered a constant in the campaign background, a reason to accumulate wealth and where to spend it once the adventure was over. And for those characters looking beyond the prime plane for something more, it offered the potential to become immortal. In short, it offered players a reason for all this adventuring malarkey in the first place. Let me explain. With the Companion set released in 1984, we were given rules for running a dominion and conducting mass combat. Suddenly, those strongholds obtained in the Expert set had a purpose beyond just being a nice place to visit. They were the beginning of fledgling nations, and many players had ambitions beyond defeating dungeons that included conquering neighbouring countries. The rules of the Companion set facilitated this, and players became barons, or became dukes, became kings. The Master set, released in 1985, expanded this further, with rules for conducting siege combat, but also enabled greater self-development of weapon use through a robust weapon mastery system that still holds up today. If you've heard of weapon mastery in 5th edition, well, it had its roots in BECMI. Of most relevance to what I call the point of it all, in the Master set was the inclusion of paths to immortality. This was your character's opportunity to achieve something akin to godhood. Many players retire their character at some point or another. What better way to do it than achieving immortality and leaving a legacy of potential worshippers behind you? But what if you didn't want to retire your character just because you had become immortal? Well, that's where the Immortal set comes in. You can still participate in prime plane concerns if you wish, but now your multiverse just got bigger. Maybe you could design a nice little solar system for you to live in. There are rules for it. Seriously though, even though Immortal play didn't get too much traction, BECMI indulged you with the option. So this is why I think it's really important to celebrate this edition of the game. It has so much to offer beyond what I call the climb to 20. Again, you reach 20th level, but so what? But let's say you reach 20th level and the king grants you a barony, and you have to defend the northern border against monsters. And now suddenly you're thrown into the running of that dominion, and the local threats you have to face off, as well as angry peasants and unhappy followers. You don't know how much fun you can have indulging yourself in managing your own little kingdom until you've tried it. Honestly, if it wasn't a popular concept, then sim games wouldn't be a thing. One thing I'm often asked is why I continue to promote BECMI over retro clones like Old School Essentials, and the reason is exactly what I've been talking about. I recently confirmed on the OSC Facebook page that Old School Essentials, for all its wonderful presentation and packaging of the BX rules, does not include Dominion play, mass combat rules, weapon mastery, and immortality. When I posted the question, I got "thank God" from one respondee, although this wasn't qualified with reasons for not wanting them. I mean, why not? Your character wouldn't have to indulge in any of this if they didn't want to. At the time of the Open Gaming License for Rory at the beginning of 2023, I was often targeted with comments suggesting I refrain from promoting a game whose license is owned by Wizards of the Coast, and shouldn't I promote something like Old School Essentials instead? Yes, the BECMI rulebooks available from Drive-Thru RPG are still licensed to Wizards of the Coast, so if you buy them, then Wizards will get some of your cash. Where I'm going with this is that I think if Old School Essentials and the people over at Necrotic Gnome took the same approach with the CMI books as they have with the Moldvay, Cook and March Basic and Expert books, with their wonderfully user-friendly designs in how the rules are set out, then I think there's a market for it, especially for those uncomfortable with handing their cash to wizards. I think Necrotic Gnome would do a brilliant job of gathering these rules together and making them appealing to the old school community of all generations. They could even, and I've only just thought of this, review the Immortal rules and make them more appealing to a wider audience. It's all part of giving the game of Dungeons & Dragons a point beyond going on an adventure and levelling up, if you needed one. And if you read through the comments, many people do. And integrating this with advanced rules, which I don't think has been done before in a publication, has all kinds of possibilities. I'll watch this space for any potential integration of CMI into OSE, although I don't hold out much hope. If I did have a stat to throw at Necrotic Gnome, it's that the BECMI Facebook page has seen a 20% increase just this year, and now stands at over 5,000 members. This is less than half the members of the Old School Essential page, but I think this is down to the contemporary release of OSE rather than anything else. If anything, OSE probably has the potential wider audience of younger OSE fans who've never come across the rules in CMI before and are ripe for plucking. Just a thought, Necrotic Gnome. Otherwise, well, I guess there's always the Rules Cyclopedia to fall back on. A brilliant book in its own right, available from Drive-Thru RPG and licensed by Wizards. Anyway, on that note, happy 40th birthday, BECMI. Your release between 1983 and 1986 introduced a huge number of geeky kids to the game of Dungeons & Dragons through your wonderful tutorial and example dungeon, your ways for us to rule our own kingdoms and defeat evil nations, or even become evil nations, and your offer of the potential to become immortal. At least in our own minds. You were our gateway to many worlds we'd never have visited without you. It's not unreasonable to state, in my humble opinion, that you changed our lives. So here's yet another thank you to Frank Mentzer and the rest of the BECMI alumni, not forgetting a special mention to Larry Elmore, who had more than a little to do with getting impressionable kids staring at that red box in the hobby store to give this strange game a try. And of course to the late Gary Gygax, Dave Arneson, and a fair few others, no doubt, without whom there might never have been this great game, at least as we know it today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed this wishing of BECMI a 40th birthday. Let us know how you first came across BECMI in the comments. Was it love at first sight? Or did you have to be romanced first to be totally convinced? It would be great to know. Please consider liking this video and also subscribing if I've earned your future attention. Otherwise, I'm BECMI Berserker. Keep making your saving throws and I hope to see you back here soon.